Washington, D.C., April 14, 2025, in a bold and controversial move that has already sparked a flurry of debate across political and legal circles. Former President Donald J. Trump proposed sending violent American criminals, including natural-born citizens, to prisons in El Salvador. The proposal came during an unusually candid conversation with Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele during a meeting at the White House on Monday. According to insiders present at the discussion, Trump floated the idea with a mix of seriousness and humor, suggesting that Bukele might need to build 5 more prisons to accommodate the influx of American offenders. The remark, while seemingly offhanded, carried the weight of a new frontier in criminal justice policy, one that blends international cooperation with a tough-on-crime philosophy that has defined much of Trump's political persona. A radical expansion of an old doctrine, the concept is not entirely unprecedented. During his first term in office, Trump prioritized the deportation of undocumented immigrants involved in criminal activity, often citing gang affiliations, particularly with MS-13. However, what makes this latest idea unprecedented is the scope: deporting natural-born American citizens, people who are not foreign nationals and have constitutional protections under U.S. law. Trump's proposal appears to build upon the 1798 Alien Enemies Act, a law originally passed in anticipation of conflict with France that gives the president authority to detain or deport non-citizens from hostile nations during wartime. But this act does not apply to U.S. citizens. The expansion of such a doctrine to include American-born offenders, even those with violent criminal histories, pushes the boundaries of constitutional law and the concept of due process. Instructing his newly appointed Attorney General, Pam Bondi, Trump has reportedly asked for an immediate and thorough legal review of all potential pathways to facilitate the relocation of U.S.-based criminals to El Salvador's newly infamous Second Terrorism Confinement Center, a high-security prison complex known for housing gang leaders and hardened criminals. "We're talking about the worst of the worst," Trump said later during an impromptu press conference. "These are people convicted of brutal assaults, rape, homicide, people who've destroyed communities. If El Salvador can do a better job keeping them off the streets than we can, then why not explore it?" The Bukele connection. President Bukele, known internationally for his aggressive crackdown on gang violence in El Salvador, appeared receptive, if cautious, about Trump's suggestion. Bukele has built his reputation on transforming El Salvador from one of the world's most violent nations into a case study of strong-handed governance and rapid public safety reform. His flagship initiative, the Terrorism Confinement Center SECT, is a maximum security prison that can house over 40,000 inmates. The facility is infamous for its strict security protocols, 24-hour surveillance, and zero-tolerance environment. Videos and images of tattooed gang members in rows, hands shackled behind their backs, under heavy armed guard have gone viral, symbolizing Bukele's approach to law and order. Trump praised the Salvadoran president for doing what it takes to make his country safe again. "If President Bukele can handle these people better than our broken system, we should look into helping him help us." While Bukele did not explicitly confirm his agreement to house U.S. prisoners, sources close to the administration say there is an open dialogue between both governments on potential collaboration in criminal justice reforms and incarceration logistics. Pam Bondi's legal review. A tightrope act. Attorney General Pam Bondi, a longtime Trump ally, has already begun reviewing constitutional limitations, jurisdictional concerns, and international detention agreements. Legal scholars, however, are deeply skeptical that such a policy could be enacted, let alone survive judicial scrutiny. It's legally implausible to deport American citizens to a foreign prison simply because they are violent. said Professor Nadine Keeler, a constitutional law expert at Georgetown University. Citizenship carries certain rights. Among those is the protection from exile and the right to due process under the Fifth and 14th Amendments. Still, Bondi has not ruled it out. "We're examining every legal tool available," she said in a press briefing. The president has made it clear that violent repeat offenders, especially those who are unrepentant, represent a national security issue. "It's our responsibility to look at every option." White House reaction. Still an idea, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt addressed growing concerns by clarifying that the proposal remains in the early stages of legal review. "This is not a signed policy. This is not an executive order. It's an idea the president is exploring with his legal team. There are significant legal questions that must be answered before anything moves forward." Leavitt reiterated that Trump's ultimate goal is the protection of American communities. "The American people are tired of living in fear. They want real solutions. And this president is willing to think outside the box, even if it makes people uncomfortable." Domestic reaction. Applause and outrage as expected, the proposal was met with intense reactions from across the political spectrum. On the right, many hailed the idea as a long overdue solution to a justice system that they argue coddles criminals. "President Trump is the only leader with the guts to take the gloves off," said Fox News host Jesse Waters. "We've tried rehabilitation. We've tried leniency. None of it works. Maybe it's time we try something extreme." Right-wing influencers on social media praised Trump's boldness. "If you commit heinous crimes, you forfeit your comfort," tweeted conservative commentator Candace Owens. "Why should U.S. taxpayers pay $40,000 a year to house rapists and murderers? Send them where they'll actually be held accountable." But civil rights advocates and legal experts raised alarms, accusing Trump of flirting with authoritarianism. "Sending citizens to foreign prisons without due process is unconstitutional. Full stop," said Anthony Romero, executive director of the ACLU. "This is not just a bad idea, it's an erosion of American civil liberties. International law and human rights concerns beyond U.S. constitutional issues. There's also the matter of international law. The Geneva Conventions, various UN human rights treaties, and multiple bilateral extradition agreements place strict rules on where and how prisoners can be relocated. El Salvador's prison system, despite recent reforms, has been criticized by human rights organizations for overcrowding, abuse, and lack of access to legal representation. "It's ironic," said Erica Mendez, a Latin American human rights attorney. "The same administration that accuses foreign countries of violating human rights now wants to send its own citizens to those same systems. That's not criminal justice. That's political theater, a political strategy for 2024 and beyond." Some analysts believe the proposal is less about real policy and more about politics. With the 2024 presidential election behind him and a possible 2028 influence campaign already simmering, Trump appears to be doubling down on the issues that mobilize his base: immigration, crime, and nationalism. This proposal allows Trump to frame himself as the only candidate willing to take radical steps to secure America, said political strategist Rachel Summers. Even if it never becomes law, it feeds his narrative that the system is broken and only he can fix it. And indeed, polls released just a day after Trump's comments show a bump in support among likely conservative voters. A Rasmussen Reports poll conducted on April 15 found that 61% of Republicans supported the concept of relocating violent criminals to foreign prisons, if legally permissible. What's next? For now, the Trump administration has committed to a multi-phase review process. Attorney General Bondi is expected to release a preliminary legal opinion within 90 days. International cooperation talks with El Salvador are also reportedly underway, although Buchel has not publicly commented on the specifics of any agreement. Behind closed doors, lawmakers on Capitol Hill are already preparing for potential hearings. Legal scholars have begun publishing white papers on the implications of cross-border incarceration for American citizens. Civil rights organizations are rallying their legal teams for what they anticipate could be a historic constitutional showdown. In the meantime, Trump remains unfazed. Some people are going to cry foul. That's fine, he told reporters Tuesday morning. I care about protecting the innocent. If we can't do that because of red tape or activist judges, then maybe we need to rethink everything. Conclusion: a test of American values at its core, this proposal raises fundamental questions about justice, safety, and the rule of law. Can the United States, a nation built on individual rights and constitutional protections, justify sending its own citizens to foreign prisons? What message does this send to the world and to future generations about how America handles its most violent offenders? Whether Trump's idea gains traction or fizzles out under the weight of legal scrutiny, one thing is clear: the conversation has begun. And in true Trumpian fashion, it has forced America to confront hard, uncomfortable questions, ones that challenge not just policy, but the very soul of the nation. In a move that has stunned legal scholars, human rights advocates, and international observers alike, a recent policy proposal from the administration has ignited widespread outrage, and for good reason. At the heart of the debate is a disturbing idea: that the United States government could deport its own citizens, even those who have served their time or are still within the reach of the American justice system. For many, this isn't just a dangerous precedent, it's a fundamental breach of everything the Constitution stands for. From a distance, the proposal may appear to target only a select group, U.S. citizens with criminal records, particularly those with convictions tied to gang activity or violence. But the implications reach far beyond those individuals. It's a legal, moral, and humanitarian quagmire that raises profound questions about the rights of citizenship, the power of the state, and the meaning of justice. The legal foundation is crumbling. Legal experts across the political spectrum have sounded the alarm. The Constitution of the United States is crystal clear. Citizenship is not conditional. Once conferred, whether by birthright or naturalization, it cannot be arbitrarily revoked. Deporting a U.S. citizen, even under the justification of national security or criminal justice, collides head-on with multiple constitutional protections. Foremost among them is the Eighth Amendment, which prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. Shipping American citizens to foreign prisons, particularly ones known for systemic abuse, is not only cruel, it's unthinkable. Reports from Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International detail horrifying conditions in El Salvador's sprawling mega-prison, Secot. Detainees are regularly denied food, medical care, and due process. Torture is not just reported, it's documented. The idea that any American, regardless of their past, should be subjected to such treatment is morally indefensible and legally unconstitutional. Then there's the First Step Act of 2018, signed into law with bipartisan support. One of its key provisions was designed to reduce the distance between incarcerated individuals and their families. It recognized a fundamental truth: proximity to loved ones is not just humane, it's rehabilitative. Forcibly removing someone thousands of miles away to a dangerous foreign facility is in direct violation of that principle. It strips away the dignity of human connection and undermines the very reforms the First Step Act aimed to create. The case of Kilmer Albrego Garcia, a harrowing precedent. Perhaps no case illustrates this crisis more vividly than that of Kilmer Albrego Garcia, a Maryland resident and U.S. citizen mistakenly deported to El Salvador. Garcia's life, like many others caught in the crosshairs of the system, has been anything but easy. While he faced allegations of gang ties in his youth, subsequent judicial findings found those links to be unsubstantiated. He served time, cooperated with legal proceedings, and had begun rebuilding his life in the United States. Then, without warning or clear legal basis, he was removed from his community and placed in one of the most dangerous prison systems in the world. This move triggered a unanimous ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court, a rare display of unity in a divided legal landscape. The court ordered Garcia's immediate return, affirming both his citizenship and the government's obligation to uphold constitutional protections. And yet, both President Trump and El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele refused to comply. The defiance wasn't just about one man. It was a message. Even the highest court in the land could be ignored. In Garcia's case, the executive branch simply decided that the judicial branch's ruling didn't matter. The constitutional principle of separation of powers, one of the bedrocks of American democracy, was openly challenged. A constitutional domino effect: what happens when one branch of government refuses to acknowledge another? What happens when a Supreme Court ruling can be brushed aside, not in a time of war or national emergency, but because it's politically inconvenient? This isn't just about Garcia. This is about every American who relies on the promise that the Constitution protects them equally under the law. It's about ensuring that no matter how unpopular someone may be, no matter what their past might hold, their rights cannot be stripped away on a whim. Legal scholars have warned that this erosion of judicial authority sets a dangerous precedent. If the executive branch can ignore a ruling concerning citizenship, what's next? Could other rights be redefined or revoked? Could due process be abandoned altogether for those deemed undesirable? It's a chilling prospect, and it brings to mind historical echoes of other regimes that allowed individual liberties to be trampled in the name of national security. Ethical questions that cannot be ignored. Even beyond the legal chaos lies a deeper ethical question. Who are we, as a nation, if we abandon our own people? We cannot pick and choose which citizens we protect. Citizenship isn't a reward to be granted when convenient. It's a permanent bond, a covenant between the individual and the nation. Many of those targeted by these proposals grew up in America, often in communities plagued by poverty, violence, and systemic neglect. To now say, "You no longer belong here," is a gross abdication of responsibility. It shifts blame for broader societal failures onto individuals, many of whom were shaped by the very circumstances America failed to correct. And then there's the issue of racial and ethnic bias. Advocates have noted that these deportation efforts disproportionately target Latino and Black citizens, echoing the discriminatory policies of past eras. The practice of double punishment, criminal sentencing followed by effective exile, is not applied evenly across demographics. It is, once again, the marginalized who bear the brunt. The role of international law and global scrutiny: this situation hasn't gone unnoticed on the world stage. International human rights organizations have issued condemnations of the U.S. proposal, warning that such actions may violate treaties to which America is a signatory, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. If the U.S. continues down this path, it risks joining a disturbing club of nations that exile dissidents, punish citizens without trial, and flout judicial rulings. This undermines not only America's credibility abroad, but its moral authority to speak on human rights issues. Countries like Canada, France, and Germany have expressed quiet concern behind diplomatic doors. El Salvador, meanwhile, finds itself complicit, accepting deportees without legal justification and imprisoning them in facilities where abuse is commonplace. The human cost. Families left behind every legal brief and Supreme Court ruling are real families. Children who wake up wondering where their parent went. Mothers who sob into empty pillows. Siblings who replay the last goodbye over and over in their minds. In Garcia's case, his daughter, a high school student in Maryland, has become an accidental activist. She writes letters to Congress, pleading for her father's return. Her grades have slipped. She's lost weight. She hasn't heard her father's voice in 6 months. I know he made mistakes, she says in one video posted online, but he's still my dad. He's still American. Why won't they bring him back? It's a haunting question. And it's not just hers. It's one that echoes across households all over the country. Households caught in the gears of a policy machine that has forgotten the very people it's supposed to serve. What comes next? The path forward is uncertain. Legal challenges continue to pile up. Civil liberties groups, including the ACLU and NAACP Legal Defense Fund, have filed lawsuits aimed at blocking further deportations. Several judges have issued temporary injunctions. Congress is considering emergency legislation to reaffirm the inviolability of citizenship. But the clock is ticking. Every day that passes without action is another day someone like Garcia remains behind bars in a foreign country, stripped of rights, voice, and hope. There is still time to course correct, but it will take more than court orders. It will take public outrage, bipartisan courage, and a recommitment to the principles that once made America a beacon of liberty. Final thoughts. Citizenship is sacred. Citizenship is not a privilege. It's not a status to be revoked when inconvenient. It is, at its core, a promise, a sacred vow between the individual and the state, forged in the ideals of equality, justice, and protection under the law. To violate that promise is to unravel the very fabric of democracy. In the coming months, as the courts deliberate, as Congress debates, and as more voices rise in protest, we must remember what is truly at stake. Not just the fate of one man or one policy, but the integrity of our entire system of governance. We must ask ourselves, what kind of country exiles its own citizens? And then we must answer with action. The administration's stance has also led to diplomatic tensions, particularly in the case of Kilmer Abrego Garcia, a Maryland resident mistakenly deported to El Salvador. Despite a unanimous Supreme Court order mandating Garcia's return, both Trump and Buchel have refused to comply, citing prior gang affiliations disputed by later judicial findings. This defiance underscores the administration's broader challenges to judicial authority and raises questions about the separation of powers. The situation continues to evolve, with potential implications for U.S. constitutional law, international human rights standards, and the balance of power between the executive and judicial branches.